I think one thing we need to do better, probably in shops, or at least as I look back, one thing I want to continue to grow in is to give over responsibility to people before you feel like you're ready to.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork podcast. Here's Jacob.
Welcome back to Verify in Field, everybody. Today, I am excited to share with you, we've got a special guest, Weston Peters. He is a second generation steward of Peters Cabinetry, which is a custom cabinet shop in Ohio. And he's particularly interested in improving shop systems, integrating technology, and developing skilled craftsmen in the trade. Thank you for joining me today, Weston.
Hey, Jacob. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate what you're doing for the industry. It's great to have a conversation here.
Maybe to get started, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little bit of your background and how you got into this business. Obviously, you're second generation, so you grew up around in the shop and in woodworking, but can you tell a little bit about that history and how you came to where you're at today?
Yeah. So real quick, my dad started the business back in, I think it was, 1988, 87. He grew up on a hog farmer out there in rural Indiana, and he married my mom, who was from Ohio here. They ended up starting out in Indiana, and as it is sometimes on family farms, there just wasn't enough farm for all the boys that were there. And so they moved to Ohio, and about 83, I think it was, to the Dayton area, which that's in southwestern Ohio, and we're about an hour from Cincinnati and Columbus, and that's where we are now. And there was a man there at the church they were going to, Ron Filber, and he said, "Hey, do you need a job?" And he owned a millwork company. And so my dad, Gary, went right from taking care of hogs to running moldings through the shapers and molders. And so quite a culture adjustment and a skill adjustment as well. But Ron took him under his wing and taught him the trade. They did a lot of the Wendy's when they were building the Wendy's back in the 80s, really growing through the United States.
Back when they used to have real wood in those restaurants.
Yeah, yep. And so they did a lot of wood. He learned the commercial trade. Then he decided he had an opportunity to work for a residential contractor. And he started out doing that. And the guy was like, "Hey, could you build these build-ins?" And so at the farm they lived here in Ohio, there was an old barn, and he got I think it was like one of those Deltas, some old stuff, old tools. Started building build-ins and decided that this was a lifestyle choice and have his family at home and build some cabinetry and millwork. And so that's some of my earliest memories, is just going out. One thing my dad did really well is the shop was accessible. I don't remember it being unsafe, but I do remember that we could come out there anytime and hang out. And there was some damage to some things, I think, that he had to repair as we scooted around here and there. But it was I still to this day, when I smell Baltic bird, I think of my boyhood, because we just cut a ton of Baltic birds on the the scroll saw and build little projects. So as I grew up, he was always an option. I worked after school there. It was this very small shop, about him and maybe one other person, and then I would help after school. He encouraged me to go somewhere else to work for some other people, get some other experience, and then come back if I was interested later, which was actually really a good thing. So I moved to Washington State. I worked for a residential contractor out there. We did framing and set tile, did some different things. Came back to Ohio and worked in poured concrete. And then I worked for another residential contractor. And I just remember I was probably like 22 or something like that. And it was a hot August day. It gets very humid here in Ohio. We were ripping out a old rotten deck and scabbing on some pieces. And it just hit me. I was like, you know what? This is not for me. I want to do the finer work. And so I called Dad up, and he's like, "Yeah, come on back." So that's how I got started. I was about 23 or 4, and I've been in it about 15 years or 18. And yeah, it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
So was that the inflection point, the moment that it switched and, you know what, I am going to go work in the family business, or at least back in millwork versus construction?
Yeah, that I would say I just had some clarity at that time that who I was as a person. I just enjoyed working with my hands a little more than, say, doing the framing and that type of work. And so one thing that I always knew was an option, but I remember him saying that, we can do this together. It doesn't have to, there'd be an opportunity to be a partner. I was excited about some of the things we could do, maybe build a new shop, automation, that type of thing. And so the combination of wanting to get into that, and then my dad being pushing more like this could be a partnership, was what drew me back in.
So that was the question I have, is was there ever a consideration of, okay, I want to go do this type of work, but maybe not for my dad? Or was it just automatic? There was, hey, I'd rather go work with my dad. This is a partnership. Was there ever any discussion about that, or even a thought?
No, that's a good question. I would say that we had a pretty frank conversation. We had several of them. I was excited about some of the automation and all of that, and he was very open to that. I've never heard him, to his credit, be like, that's just the way we've always done. And he was open to that. And so because of that, I felt like this was the best opportunity. He had worked a lot of years creating just a good reputation. And so there was a lot of foundation laid for us to grow and to scale. The things we were lacking that we talked about was just systems and processes and some of the business side. And so I felt like that I could come on as a second generation and not just be helping my dad, but rather bring my own ideas to the table, and together we could grow something. And so that was, we're two individual people. We have, there's been tension, there's been different ideas, but we've always respected one another and had a good working relationship. And I felt like that was the best opportunity versus starting something of my own. Hey, I can still have some input and say in this, we can do this together. And yeah, he actually sold out younger than many people would, just because that's his vision, is to pass it on before he's 80.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've mentioned a couple of times that you had these ideas and you wanted to come in and help bring automation to your dad's business. And I think that's a pretty common second generation, especially over the last 20 years, career arc or kind of company arc. But where would you say the seeds of that started? Because obviously you grew up watching your dad building things the way he did, which most wood shops probably at that point were doing things very similarly. And then as CNC equipment and automation has come into our industry, like where would you say you were exposed to that? Was it your time working in construction? Was it just being in the internet age and being able to see what else is out there? Would you say those seeds started for you to say, oh, this is something I feel like I can bring to the business and I'm interested in it?
Yeah, that's good. Thinking back, I remember pretty clearly when I first read a couple books, which your audience is probably familiar with. One of them was 2 Second Lean by Paul Akers, and the other one was The Goal by Eli Goldratt, I believe. But those two kind of are more processes. One's on lean, one's on the theory of constraints. But that's where it hit me that it's fun to build cabinets, but I think what I enjoy the most, or more, as much, or at least as much or more, as building the cabinets into millwork, and was working on the processes surrounding that you can actually find a lot of fulfillment and joy in that. And so that was one of the seeds. The other seed was, we took the industry magazines, we took the ones, the FDMC and the woodworking or wood shop news. And so you would read articles, you would see things like in there. And then probably the biggest thing was going to IWF. I remember, I think it was 2008, we were sitting in a class on CNC technology. I actually just wrote a little blog post about this on our website, CNC automation and the path to that for small shops. But the speaker there, he's like, you're not really a serious cabinet shop unless you have a CNC. And at the time I was like, oh man, that kind of hurts a little. Those were the kind of things that we were exposed to. We've seen it. And I now understand what he means. I don't know if that's a definitive statement, but it just transformed our business. It opened up new opportunities. And so those probably three things. My own love of learning. I just love to read different things. The woodworking magazines, and then just the woodworking trade shows is what propelled that.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely early on at those stages, probably 2008, I imagine you probably also heard there's a lot of dialogue in the woodworking community about craftsmanship versus automation and modernization using technology. Right. And so I think it's one thing, I imagine, for you to come in and partnering with your dad and having him being open to change. But I imagine you have other craftsmen in your business that you also had to get them on board with these change, I imagine, right? Was there any friction there, or was there any struggle, or how did you approach that? Or was everybody on board from day one with the changes and, hey, we're going to adopt new technology and automation, we're going to improve processes? In any woodworking business, if you've been doing things for, at that point, 20 some years, change is hard for everybody, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. And I've heard it from other shops in our area too. We have good relationships with lots of shops, and just even a sense of pride. We do everything the old way. And that's certainly a choice. It's a choice. I guess I'll leave it at that. But the way we viewed it, and it helped that we had a very small team. And so there wasn't a lot of people we had to convince. But I view the technology and the automation as, or I say automation, I'm really talking about CNC, and now it's robotics and other things coming, but as taking care of the repetitive task. Whereas the craftsman, the tradesman, there's always a place for him, whether it's building that custom hood or really just the judgment call and being responsible for the fit and finish. because the men that worked on the Gamble and the Blackner house and the green stuff way back in the day, if they had this technology available to them, they would probably use it. They still would be craftsmen and do all that, but use it for the things that cutting out boxes and doing arches and that kind of thing. And then the craftsmen can really focus on, our team can focus on kind of the more fun stuff, really. I mentioned the curved hood or other millwork projects we've done and leverage the CNC and that type of thing. So I think they work really well together. We have a display in our shop, old planes up on the wall, and it's sitting right beneath a brand new table saw. And I think that juxtaposition of the old and the new actually can work well together. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that it really wasn't a hard sell.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's a good point it's a whole discussion on its own, but is how much of craftsmanship is intellectual versus physical. I think it's the marriage of the two, right? You have to be able to execute based on your knowledge and experience and stuff, but you're adding new tools to the toolbox, right?
Yeah.
And so with that and I think you've expressed this very well, which is a respect for what was already built and established in the ways that your father and the team built the business that was what you came into, while also not resting on your laurels and like, how do we continue to push the company forward? How do we continue to push to be growing and learning and improving and taking advantage of what we can to push forward? And obviously over the years since you came into the business, and you mentioned it's, I think, 18 years now, what are some of the meaningful changes you've made since joining, or any decisions that you made that maybe felt risky or uncomfortable? I imagine there's other key decisions or inflection points along the way.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because every company has those points that they come to, and then you can look back to and be like, oh, wow. So we chose this path and this is the result. This was good. Sometimes it's not always good when you back up and learn, and that's part of business. But to answer your question, I would say probably 6 or 8 I can think of just here as I think back over the last 10 years. I'll try to, I guess, give them an overview. The one was, it's very simple. This is nothing that groundbreaking or whatever, but just like knowing who you are and where you want to go as a company. I think being comfortable with that. We have intentionally chosen to keep a small business where there's 10 of us here, and it's a lifestyle choice, and we're comfortable with that and not intimidated or spend too much time thinking we need to be adding more employees or we got to get more floor space or this or that. That will probably be some in the future. But just establishing that vision, mission, values, those things, I think that's where they can be a real benefit. It's kind of like a guide to you. And so when we settled on that, so this is who we want to be, this is where we want to go. We want to have a place where we can grow our team, that we can really refine processes, and frankly, just have a good time together and provide a good product for people. Almost frees up to just enjoy the journey. The other one was just learning to love learning. We can learn so much from people, and whether it's the restaurant or just the gas station attendant or other shops, and I think that can bring a lot of clarity and help a business to be able to grow and expand a little bit your processes without your floor space and your people and all. And that's maybe a personal one for me. I just really enjoy to read and to learn from other people. So embracing that, even from our team, I tell the guys, I want a little pushback here. We have the kind of relationship there that let's get all the ideas on the table. Embracing the technology, looking back, got a CNC. We literally didn't have the space. We were like 3,000 square feet. And so soon after I came on, we built a shop, and now we're about at 15,000 square feet, I think it is. We had a space constraint, but that really opened it up. We actually paid for that machine, and I think it was 2 years, almost just by cutting for other shops. And so that was an opportunity. And then there was some commercial millwork. We did a job down for the Atlanta Hawks locker room that it was specialty stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do if we would have had a CNC sitting in our shop. So we worked with another shop to do that. But anyhow, embracing the technology now we have, and this is changing by the day, but there's we just had our second quarter meeting with our whole team, and I wanted to go over some safety things. And here's just an example of how this can help a business, but I'll have these examples. I think in 10 minutes, I had a nice slideshow on safety for joiners, power feeders, wide belt sanders, and maybe thicknessers, platers. And before, it had taken me hours to put together that. Had videos in there, so you can leverage that. That's another thing, and just embracing the technology. Another inflection point was just to embrace outsourcing. This has been a really big one for us, that you punch above your weight, as it were, by leveraging other shops. And one thing I hear about that a little bit. Here at shops say we do everything in-house, and that's okay. That's a choice. But for us, we felt like we could serve more people and actually have better products, frankly, by outsourcing like drawers and our doors. We outsource our drawings some for complex projects, things like bookkeeping even, but being able to do that allows you to scale without changing your floor space a lot. You can have a lot more throughput, of course. And probably the biggest choice we made recently was to go ahead and outsource our installs. We do a lot of high-end residential work, and that was risky. We've spent a lot of time thinking about that, but it came down to we had a good opportunity with a couple good installers that we trusted. And we also just looked at the math that I would walk out in the shop when the team was out on installs and everything would be quiet. And it's like, you have all this overhead sitting here, and I'm really only going to get paid for our labor, maybe $6,000 to $8,000. I'm just throwing out numbers, but for like 3 days, my team out there, that's what you're going to get paid to do a cabinet install about. Well, we can produce a lot more revenue in our shop and there's that amount of time and absorb that revenue better, or that overhead better. So we decided to do it carefully. There's still some installs that we take care of ourselves, but that has opened up. We haven't slowed down a bit. We were able to just so now we could hire an install team to do it, but I would rather hire those people to build cabinets and still do the model we're doing. So that's an example of a couple things. Systems and SOPs, the team's been good at this. We went to paperless shop last year. Everything's on now tablets and up, so everything can be kept up to date. It's helped us a lot to be more accurate, and we can bring on a new employee. He can be up to speed on how to put in a custom Lazy Susan because we have an SOP for that. And so even our machine startups, we have little SOPs for that. And something we're still growing in, Jacob, but that's been another one of those inflection points, is just to be intentional about that. One thing I hear is everything's custom. How can you have an SOP? You think about it, everything can be broken down to a process, I think. And that's just what we try to do. We're still a custom shop, but there's still a lot of processes that go into that. And I've been influenced by others in the industry. I know Jeff Finney, we've talked some, and he has good resources over there, Alt Cabinet on this, and we use some of that stuff. And probably the last one I was just thinking about was just being willing to let go and empower your people. I had a good example of this with my dad even. He's just not been the type to just hang on to stuff. And so I think one thing we need to do better, probably in shops, or at least as I look back, one thing I want to continue to grow in is to give over responsibility to people before you feel like you're ready to, because I just have seen the fruit of that. And it's really, for me, really rewarding and fun just to see a young person come into our environment and be given responsibility before he even thinks he's ready for it, then really grow into that and just grow as a man and as a person and as a team builder. For the owner or the steward or whatever, the person responsible, it can feel like they might not do it right. And it's probably right. They're going to mess up and things. But if you grow through that, you can actually free up time to do other more, as it were, high leverage work or things that you can grow and have freedom. Like we have planned a family vacation here. We're going to leave tomorrow, be gone for a week, and I'm going to try to unplug. But I have confidence that the estimates are going to happen. The CNC is going to run. The cabinets are going to get delivered. So there'll be things to deal with when I come back, but it's not all dependent on me. And so that to me is rewarding, to be a part of something that is bigger than just myself or whatever. So I don't know if that makes sense. And then probably the last thing is, I think back a little risk or inflection points that I had as I thought about this, is be innovative in your industry, wherever you're at. Be willing to look at or be aware for opportunities to connect other people together. We've had some really good opportunities to be an outsource partner for another larger shop. They'll come to us for this or that, and we, with our relationships, can maybe provide that as a third party. And so don't just have your head down doing the work all the time. Be looking for opportunities. A few years ago, so we're a dealer for some box cabinets, and that's like our entry-level cabinets. And when COVID hit, those went way up in quality, and the brands we were with, they went way up in price and down in quality. And just because it affected us all in different ways, I know, and those large companies were affected that way. And so we had that. We didn't have a good solution for our more, I'll say, like entry-level customers. We were already doing our high-end work, which we call our custom premier. And so we started thinking, it's like, well, what if we would do like a pared down custom cabinet line? I know some other shops have done this. This isn't. But for us, like, I didn't realize at the time we were doing it for a price point, because we felt like that we could actually almost replace our box cabinet offering with a paired, I'll call a pared down, or we call it custom select. So it's just select options, door styles, finishes, colors. And we were able to do that because the companies we were outsourcing with would sell them to us at a cheaper price because they were more simple for them to make. But I guess I'm telling the story because what I didn't realize was when we rolled that out and we shared it with our contractors, is that really fit well here in the Midwest, because I don't know how it is in other, probably people everywhere this way. They like to find that good sweet spot between price and value. And so by offering a certain percentage of our customers this, it took away the argument that we can't afford custom cabinets, because here we can get a custom cabinet at a fair, affordable price. There's some limitations, yes, and we can add some things in a la carte. But by making that little tweak in our marketing, really, along with our offering, it really opened up. We work with builders now that we wouldn't have done before with new homes, because they can send their customers over to us, get a custom cabinet, and they're getting a good price, and it feels good to them because they're buying middle of the road. So I don't know. That was a way that we innovated in the way we messaged our offering, and did a good move. So there's a few things. I talked a lot there. I don't know if any of that makes sense or if you have any questions on that, but there's a few inflection points.
No, that was great. And I think you shared a lot of really great nuggets there. I think if I were to summarize, and this, I've interviewed quite a few second generation woodworkers, and what I've found is a lot of founders, first generation, are craftsmen first, and they're craftsmen who then fall into building a business around what they do. And I find second generation are more systems thinkers coming in, and not necessarily, it's not that you're not a craftsman, but you're not craftsman first. You're thinking about, we've already established the craftsmanship, but you're thinking about, hey, how can we take this to the next level? And that's done by outgrowing what, a single person can do by themselves. And there's still so many businesses that never get past that point of the business falls apart if I don't exist or if I take a week off. Yeah. And that's a very fragile place to be in long term. And so you've already expressed like you're about to go on vacation, and how empowering it is. I think we operate out of fear as leaders or as managers too often. And I think this goes into your point about outsourcing as well, because all of those decisions, in my experience, come down to how hard it is to control what we can control. And people hold on to install because I want to control the results, but they're limiting their capacity. They're limiting what they can do as a result of, I want to control everything. And similarly, as an owner founder, if you don't implement systems and delegate responsibility and give your team a chance to make a mistake, like that's how every one of us learned, was somebody at some point gave us that chance. That's right. And we made mistakes and we grow from it and we respond to it. And even us, we still make mistakes, but we feel like I'm the one who has to fix it so I can make the mistake. But when you get past that and you say, hey, look, I know I want to delegate this, one, it frees you up to be where it feels like you are now as a leader of your business, as that visionary role of, okay, I can think strategically, and instead of constantly being in the weeds, blocking and tackling, I can look at this and say, oh, we need a system here, or we need a process here, or we need a tool here. And that's now possible. We can try this new custom select thing, and maybe it doesn't work out, but I have some signs that I think it will. And now that we get some data from that, hey, this is actually a great decision, let's roll with it. You can't be in a position to take a risk or make a decision like that if you're in the weeds doing everything yourself. Yeah. Much less taking time off with your family, which eventually you'll burn out and you'll feel like, hey, well, what am I doing with my life? Yeah. And so I think a lot of those points you just shared, I think very well encapsulate that comes with getting to that next level of business development, of systems thinking, as opposed to just constantly being the operator yourself. Yeah. You shared with me ahead of this a presentation you put together for a school presentation you did. And in it, you described, and I love the way that you explained the difference between cabinetry versus millwork. And I think this is something all of us woodworkers struggle with, the people in our lives that we try to explain. What is it that we do? And if you're not in this business, those terms can feel both interchangeable or just confusing. Can you talk a little bit about how you framed that and how you explained the difference between those two? Yeah, it is so true. It's like we hear casework, we hear case goods, we hear millwork, we hear cabinetry. And so you hear cupboards, which I still trade from the older generation. I was like, oh no, that's not what we call them anymore. But
anyhow, it is a lot of terminology. So there's a lot of overlap. And so, yeah, we had a school reach out to us and wanted to come in and learn a little bit about the trade. And I also put it together for our own team too. But the way I look at it, and there's, again, maybe some different definitions people would have, but the cabinets are what more box based in a sense. And so in the residential world or even the commercial world, those are the things that are built around a box, and they help organize your space. They help organize the kitchen. And the millwork is basically everything else, is how I defined it. It's things like the interior doors and the trim. It's also in our industry, I would think of millwork as we recently did, as part of the project, we did a really nice custom bar. That would be cabinetry. Off to the other side, there's an entire wall that is slats. It's all slats, and built into that is 2 secret doors. That's not really cabinetry. I would call that's millwork. That's the things that kind of define the space. So that's how I separate it. Box based, organize the space, everything else help define the space.
I think that's how you put it, that I thought was so well put, was casework and cabinetry helps you organize the space, and millwork defines the space. And I really love that differentiation of the way you phrase that. And so obviously, even in residential, which seems is a lot of your focus, you have both. And a lot of times they may interact with each other, overlap. But you talked early on about deciding who you wanted to be as a company. And with that comes so much freedom. And for you guys, it was to stay small and really focus on the type of work that you do. And even within that, you've mentioned examples of where you've been able to differentiate and introduce custom select. Can you talk about, I think there it seems like you've expressed there's a sense of kind of freedom, being comfortable with knowing who we want to be, as opposed to just keeping up with the Joneses or feeling, hey, we got to be growing to grow, or we got to compete with the shop down the street. But if you know what your goal is, it's a lot easier. It seems like it gives you freedom of, hey, we know who we're trying to be. We're not influenced by outside forces.
Yeah.
And that makes it very clear what our path is.
Yeah. Again, if we have our heads down doing the work all the time, we're not able to like work on the business, as it were, or to think about, like you said, the things that earlier about if we're all in the weeds, blocking and tackling, it's hard to think about these things. That doesn't happen overnight, I think, and it can still change. I think that it's good to set goals and where you want to go, and yet also recognize that that's what they are. It's a general direction, and we need to be able to pivot, go another direction if we need to. One thing that's helped me with this a little bit is to just spend a little time every year and at the end of the year, make some goals for the year for our company. And personally, I like to do this too. I've run into this a little better, that I find that, you can go back and reference that. Like I mentioned earlier, our second quarter meeting, we just had all the goals up on the screen. We could have little check marks, measure your progress. And so I think that can help us stay on course. One of the guys that work here, Reed, he likes to say, we need to grow with no. But what he's saying is there's certain things that just don't fit us, that who we are not. And if we say yes to those, maybe it's the dollar amount, like we're not a good fit for if it's under a certain, or maybe it's the type of work, whatever. We're saying no to something else if we say yes to that. And so having some clarity around that really opens you up to just lean into it and be more effective with where you're at. I do think we want to stay small, and it's true, but that doesn't mean you don't stop growing. Growth isn't always in real estate and people. We have a lot. I still feel like we have a lot of room to grow here in processes and other things that we can talk about. But I want to be clear about that need to have goals, and I think it's healthy to always be pushing us or like growing.
And so on that note, you have in your time with the business expanded facilities and your capabilities, expanded your shop space, invested equipment. And that is, I imagine, has empowered you to take on different types of work, or at least to be able to redefine some of these things. And can you talk a little bit about how you approach those decisions? You mentioned on an annual basis setting some goals. And I imagine at some point one of those goals was, hey, like we need to build an addition, or we need some space to put this CNC that we bought, right? But are there any advice you would share, ways you've gone about making those decisions while staying true to, like you said, hey, we know who we want to be, we know where we want to go, and here's a junction point where we need to make some physical investments?
Yeah, it hasn't always been calculated and planned out ahead of time. Sometimes you're just like, oh, here we go. But I think you need to know where you're going to go and how you want to get there, but be willing to take some risk. For us, as far as we had to have more floor space if we were going to grow at all. And so I like to think of it as an opportunity to work for more people, serve more people. We need to make growth decisions that are not going to be negative cash problems or negative bad business decisions. We need to be deliberate and give some thought to it. But I trust my gut a lot more than I should maybe. But when you have your goals and you know where that's kind of like the umbrella over top. And then it's just like, all right, this is what we need to do. We're thinking about right now a couple things. One of them would be upgrading our CNC router, and I lean on the team too. I was like, hey, what do you guys think? How is this going to make us more money if we do this? Is this really what we need to do, or should we wait? So I don't know if I really shared it, but a combination maybe of leaning on our team and being willing to take a risk and go from there.
Awesome. Looking ahead, just if you project out in the future for Peters Cabinetry, what do you see that you're excited about or maybe concerned about in the next 5 to 10 years?
Something I've been thinking about really, and I don't have a desire really to grow to, let's just say, 30 employees or that type of thing. I just can't get passionate about it for some reason. I've really enjoyed the last 10 years. And so maybe I would enjoy the next if I would go that way, but I'm not there yet. And so one thing we're looking at right now is upgrading our finishing process. That's an area where it will probably require a little more floor space. We might need to add an addition, but looking at automating our finishing, like with at least part of it being a flat line. And so that's one area we're leaning in to improve our finishes, along with, I feel we're in the Midwest, and so we're not getting a lot of the pressure, maybe the co-star with the type of finish versus like water-based, lacquer-based. We're all lacquer-based. I feel like that the industry is going to go to water-based. And so I'm interested in being an early adopter of that here, even in the Midwest. And so that's one of our projects we have, is to do some trial and error. I haven't found something I'm happy with yet, but we are trying things and we're working on that. Probably the thing that I'm the most, as I think about our company, is like I've really, like I mentioned before, I've enjoyed the last 10 years. We've made some mistakes. We've done some things that, looking back, have been good decisions. And I really enjoy, or I could get excited about being a cheerleader, come alongside other companies that might be into the dollar range, and hey, let's work together in some way to scale this up to 3 million plus or something like that. If there's a way that our team or our shop could be involved in, that's maybe a little innovative thinking, but I would be excited about that. Very excited. I've enjoyed the young people coming in from the schools and giving some tours and things. That's been a lot of fun. And so I can see some kind of leaning into more of those type of things if it works out.
So getting to a stage of giving back and mentoring and sharing some of your learnings with others that could benefit from it.
When you do that, you learn a lot yourself too. And so that's fun to do. We recently had a situation, you talk about like the trades a little bit. We had our last person we hired, he reached out, we had an ad out, and he's not the most qualified at all. And as far as experience, he was working at a gas station as an attendant. Nothing wrong with that type of job. That's just not where you normally think to find a cabinet craftsman. Putting in a few hours a week, but he had good referral. And so I went ahead and hired him. I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. We're going to start out just maybe part-time. And within 3 days, he just came in and just blossomed in our environment. And so that brings a lot of enjoyment. It's a way to bless others. And also it gives our team here, I would say it stretches them, which is good for us all a little bit. And so that type of thing, I would like to be involved in somehow, if possible, to help other shops so that maybe create systems where you can hire somebody like that. And now I know it don't always work out, but in this particular case, we took a risk and the young man's just doing great. And so that's fun to me when you see that happen.
Awesome. Weston, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us and sharing your wisdom and the story of Peters Cabinetry. And if there's anybody out there that is just interested in connecting or finding out more from you, from Peters Cabinetry, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can jump on our website, peterscabinetry.com, contact information there. I'm on LinkedIn and on social media. We have a social media account, Peters Cabinetry does, just at Peters Cabinetry. We're not super active on there, but yeah, those places are where they can reach out. I'm excited about the millwork and cabinetry industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity as the older generation ages out. I think the shops that are able to use technology and then train the new ones coming in are going to be around a while. I think that's the key because there's a lot of opportunity for youth or for young people in a career. So yeah, be happy to talk to anybody if we can help, and we'll learn from anyone we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Weston, and look forward to continue to see what you're doing in the industry.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.